Okay, strap yourselves in. We are going deep on the latest developments between Russia and Ukraine. Peace talks. Maybe. It's been crazy lately. Putin and Trump finally talked on the phone, plus that prisoner exchange.
Right. It's wild how fast things change. Just weeks ago, both sides were like, nope, no ceasefire. Now they're all about peace. What gives?
It all kicked off with Mark Vogel getting released. He's that ex-American diplomat locked up in Russia on drug charges. They swapped him for Alexander Vinnik, the Russian guy we had here for money laundering. Cryptocurrency stuff, not your average trade, and the timing is suspicious.
Totally. Especially with Trump saying pardoning Vogel, it's like, quote, the beginning of a beautiful friendship, end quote. Like straight out of Casablanca. Historically, this kind of gift giving is how leaders warm up before negotiations.
Yeah, like Vogel standing there with Trump beer in hand, thanking Putin. Staged? Maybe playing to Trump's love of a good show.
Could be. But the phone call, that's the biggie. Trump called Putin, straight up suggested a ceasefire. But Putin, he wants a permanent fix, not a timeout.
Shows you he's thinking long term, not just stopping the fighting for now.
For sure. And the Kremlin's response, super formal, almost cold. Like they weren't thrilled, especially with the energy talk. Trump's whole U.S. oil will force Putin to deal thing. Maybe not a hit.
Then there's the U.S. team Trump picked. Secretary of State Rubio, CIA Director Ratcliffe, National Security Advisor Walls, and Steve Witkoff, his Middle East guy. But no Keith Kellogg, the new Ukraine envoy. Weird.
Makes you wonder if Ukraine's getting pushed aside. Is the U.S. just desperate to end the war, even if it screws Ukraine over in the process?
Trump even said he and Putin might visit each other. In this climate, wild. But why even bring it up? What's the game here?
Visits like that, minefield. Security nightmares, backlash at home for both of them. Trump gets slammed for siding with Russia. A risky move. And where they want to meet, Saudi Arabia. Not Turkey, not China. Interesting.
Feels like high-stakes poker. Every move calculated, nobody showing their cards.
Speaking of moves, what about the actual peace deal? What's the dividing line? The Trump administration seems to want things frozen where they are, the front lines as is. But Putin, he's said he wants to free Donetsk, maybe even all four regions, Kherson, Zaporizhia, the whole shebang.
Two very different visions for Ukraine's future. How do you even start to bridge that gap?
Depends on how ambitious the negotiators are, and let's be real, how strong each side's military is. It's a tightrope walk, plus the practical stuff. There was no official war declaration. Russia says those annexed regions are theirs now. Legally messy.
And if they control the left bank of the Dnipro River, Zaporizhia, that's a key city.
They get a land bridge to Crimea. Not a coincidence, they're already building stuff over there. Infrastructure, long game for sure. Zelensky, meanwhile, he's suggesting a straight-up land swap.
Wants to trade that chunk of Kursk Oblast Ukrainian forces hold, but didn't say what he wants back. Kremlin shut it down immediately.
Putin trading for Kursk? Grout it. Doesn't fit his goals at all.
And Ukraine's role in all this. Someone asked Trump if he sees Kyiv as an equal partner. He totally dodged the question.
Worrying, right. Feels like U.S. interests are first. End the war, get good deals. Who cares about what Ukraine actually needs?
Especially with Putin pushing for sanctions to be lifted, not even acknowledging Zelensky's priorities. Putin's calling the shots, not Zelensky.
And then there's NATO. Trump's been bashing him for years, calls him a burden. Combine that with this whole appease Putin thing, and Europe's getting nervous.
They are. The British Telegraph ran a headline, "Now it's Putin and Trump's world. America is no longer interested in providing European security." Yikes.
Yeah, EU leaders are feeling left out. It's their backyard, after all. Their foreign ministers put out a statement saying they'll help Ukraine more, back its territory, and they want in on these talks. White House basically said, we'll see.
So basically blowing him off.
Pretty much. No transparency, just anxiety. Who knows what Trump's going to do next?
And back home, not everyone's loving this. Mike McFaul, the former U.S. ambassador to Russia, big Democrat, he's been slamming Trump, says his team's clueless, playing right into Putin's hands.
McFaul's point is that Trump talking about Ukraine joining NATO or giving up land before talks even started, that weakens the U.S. position. Amateur move.
So America's divided. Trump fans say this is how you end wars. Critics, mostly Democrats, some Republicans, are worried. Is this appeasement? Are we abandoning Ukraine?
It's messy. And in the middle of it all, you can't forget the people. People are dying, families are shattered, and who knows what'll happen to Ukraine in the long run.
So the big question, what if they actually do get a ceasefire? What happens then? What are the traps?
A ceasefire is a chance to talk instead of shooting. We gotta be real, though. It'll probably be temporary.
Like Cyprus, Golan Heights, temporary ceasefires that lasted decades. No peace treaty in sight.
Right. The trick is using that time to fix the root problems, rebuild trust. But both sides could just be taking a breather, getting ready to fight again.
Especially with all the weapons still going to Ukraine. Adds fuel to the fire.
For sure. And that's where Europe matters. They want Ukraine stable and safe, and they're willing to pay for it, send weapons. But can they do it without the U.S.? Doubtful.
And the economic fallout. Sanctions are hurting everyone. Rebuilding Ukraine will cost a fortune.
Huge problem. It'll take international aid, private money, maybe even Russia chipping in. Everyone needs to work together, which is tough after all this.
And the elephant in the room. U.S. money in Ukraine. That U.S. Treasury Secretary visit. First time a Trump official met with Zelensky since all these started. It was all about protecting U.S. investments. A treaty for the $500 billion already there. A deal for rare earth metals.
Yeah, looks like saving U.S. dollars is more important than lasting peace or making sure Ukraine's safe.
And what if Trump backs out, leaves Europe to deal with it? There's that U.S. law, the REPO Act. If Trump wins again, cuts off aid, they could seize Russian assets to fund Ukraine.
Scary, right? Shows how uncertain things are. And Zelensky himself said, Europe guaranteeing security without the U.S. Unrealistic, he called it. He even asked for like 100,000 to 150,000 troops from allies after a ceasefire. EU said 50,000 max. Big difference.
What Ukraine needs and what Europe's willing to give, two different things. Plus, Trump's against sending U.S. troops, and he expects Europe to pay for rebuilding.
Yeah, he's consistently against U.S. military getting involved, says it's not needed here. And if U.S. or NATO troops get deployed and things escalate, direct conflict with Russia, that's what the U.S. is trying to avoid at all costs.
So whatever peace deal they cook up, security is going to be the main course.
Has to be. Putin wants Ukraine demilitarized, their defenses weakened, maybe international observers at the start to keep things calm.
But in the end, Ukraine's on their own. Their relationship with Russia, their own political moves, that's what will keep them safe.
Yeah, a tough balancing act. Gotta be smart, gotta be realistic about the whole geopolitical game.
So, prediction time. How's this all going to play out?
I'm going to say 60-40 chance of an agreement first half of the year, probably a temporary ceasefire. I was more optimistic before, but things are getting murkier. Of course, this Munich security conference, that could throw everything off.
That word, temporary, loaded when you're talking ceasefires. Cyprus, Golan Heights, temporary for decades.
Exactly. No fighting is better than fighting, even without a fancy treaty. Gets you time to talk.
So you're hopeful, kinda.
I'd say cautious is more like it. We could be headed towards peace if the guns stay quiet. France just sent those Mirage 2000 jets to Ukraine, though. Shows that support's still flowing.
It's a crazy situation, lots of moving pieces, no easy answers.
And this is just the first step. Could take years to sort it all out. I'm thinking maybe by summer 2026 we'll have a resolution. The elections in Ukraine, maybe a new leader there will be more open to talking with Russia.
And Putin's got those parliamentary elections in 2026. He'll want to win before then. Something other than fighting the West to run on.
Right, but for now, it's all up in the air. Nobody knows for sure.
Well, this has been a wild ride. Thanks for breaking it all down for us.
Glad to do it.
And everyone listening, stay tuned. Things are changing fast. The stakes are high. This story's far from over.
Absolutely. Stay informed, stay engaged. This matters.
So much of this feels like, I don't know, a giant chessboard. Every move affects Ukraine, Russia, the whole world.
Yeah, and we can't forget there's this push for peace, sure, but underneath, it's all about power, about each country grabbing what it can.
It's easy to get lost in the politics, but this war, it's real people getting hurt, families forced out, lives lost. Ukraine's going to be dealing with the fallout for years.
Right. Any peace deal, it has to put those people first. Keep them safe. Maybe international troops, observers to make sure things stay calm.
Okay, let's say, hypothetically, the fighting stops. Ceasefire's in place. What then? What problems pop up, even without the actual war?
Well, at least they can talk then. Diplomacy, not bombs. Could be the start of something good. You gotta be realistic, though. Any ceasefire now, it's a Band-Aid. Temporary, we've seen it before. Cyprus, Golan Heights, years, decades without a real peace treaty.
So they use that time to fix the real issues, right? Build trust, all that.
That's the hope. But the risk is it's just a pause. Both sides catch their breath, rearm, and boom, round two.
Especially if Ukraine keeps getting weapons from other countries, just adds to the tension.
For sure. And Europe. They want Ukraine stable, safe. They're putting their money where their mouth is, sending aid, weapons. But can they do it alone if the U.S. walks away? I'm skeptical.
Then there's the economic side. Sanctions are hurting everyone. Rebuilding Ukraine will be insanely expensive. Who pays for all that?
Tough question. Probably a mix of things. Global aid, private investors, maybe even Russia contributing, though that seems unlikely given the circumstances. It'll take a lot of cooperation, and after all the animosity, it's a tough act.
So many unknowns, it's hard to see a clear path forward. How do we even make sense of all this when everything keeps changing?
That's international relations for you. Everyone's got their own goals. Things get messy fast. We can't predict the future, but we can look at history, what's happening now, and try to figure out what each player wants.
Informed guessing, basically. For folks listening, it's a lot to take in. What's the most important thing to remember? How do you even keep up with it all?
Don't just believe everything you hear. Think for yourself. Look for different viewpoints. Talk it out with people. What happens in Ukraine affects us all, so staying informed matters.
Absolutely. You mentioned elections, both in Ukraine and Russia. How might those shake things up?
Elections are always wild cards. New leaders, new priorities. Could make things easier, could make them harder. We'll have to wait and see.
Seems like we're strapped in for a bumpy ride, no matter what. Any warning signs people should watch for, things that might signal a big change is coming?
Definitely watch for a spike in violence. If things heat up again, that could blow the whole peace process apart. It means they're not talking anymore, they're back to fighting. Also, listen to what they're saying. Are they looking for compromise or just digging in their heels? The tone tells you a lot about what they really want.
Words matter. One wrong phrase, one misunderstanding could have huge consequences. So, bottom line, are you feeling hopeful, worried, or somewhere in between?
I think a temporary ceasefire is possible, maybe even likely. But a real, lasting peace, that's going to be a long, tough road. It needs patience, compromise, and a willingness to fix the things that started this whole mess in the first place.
That's a great point to end on. Thanks again for helping us understand all this.
Happy to do it.
And to everyone listening, this is just one piece of a much bigger story. Stay informed, stay engaged.
Yeah, this is important. What happens next is up to all of us.
You know, it's striking. Everyone's talking peace, but there's so much else going on. Political stuff, money, makes you wonder who really wins in the end, even if the fighting stops.
Oh, absolutely. Countries don't just suddenly become best buddies. There's always an angle, something they're trying to get out of it. Peace is great, but it's got to benefit them, you know?
It's like trying to solve one of those Rubik's Cubes, but someone keeps scrambling it up while you work. And it's easy to forget, with all the high-level stuff, that this war, it's real people caught in the middle.
Totally. We can't just talk about territory and strategy. Like, it's a game. People are losing their homes, their families, some are losing their lives.
Yeah. Peace isn't just about politicians shaking hands. It's about creating a world where people can actually live safely.
Right. And that takes more than just words on paper. It's got to be a real change, people willing to let go of the hate, the anger, fix the things that caused the war in the first place.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground here. Potential for peace, the roadblocks, who's pulling the strings. But as we wrap up, I'm curious, what can our listeners do? How do they stay in the loop, understand what's going on?
Honestly, think for yourselves. Don't just take things at face value. Look for different sources, different opinions. Talk about it with people. Really dig into the issues. What happens in Ukraine affects all of us, so we got to be informed.
Couldn't agree more. Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to something this important. Before we go, any last thoughts?
I guess just remember, this isn't over. It's going to be a long process, twists and turns. Don't get discouraged. Stay curious, stay informed, and stay involved. What we do now matters.
Well said. Thanks again for joining us. It's been truly enlightening.
My pleasure. Always happy to talk about this stuff.
And to everyone listening, thanks for coming along on this deep dive with us. Remember, knowledge is power. The more you know, the better equipped you are to make a difference.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Until next time.
And that's a wrap on The Deep Dive. Subscribe to our podcast, available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. We are here to make things clear. New episodes every day.